Take one. What's up, man? Joe Riley here with the second installment to my Shred Shop guitar lessons. I want to start off today by talking about a little legato style playing. Legato is hammer-ons, pull-offs, things like that. Real smooth playing. Staccato is picked. If you want to pick it out and break up the notes, you call that staccato picking. I, myself, am a huge legato player. I love the likes of guitar players like George Lynch and Alex Skolnick and these guys. Dimebag Darrell used a lot of that. Randy Rhoads, obviously. Those kind of guys are my huge influences, and we'll talk about that a little later. Going to that, I want to start today's lesson off by just a few exercises that I use to warm up with. I also put them in my own playing and my own solos that I do. The first one we're going to do is basically, it's based off of a Locrian mode. The modes basically are 7 derivatives of a major scale. And we'll talk about that here in a minute too. So let's start with this pattern. It's an easy warm-up. It's great to do if you're playing a show live and you want to warm up backstage. Or if you just want to write it into your own guitar solos. It starts at the 5th fret. We're going to use A. It's going to be kind of an A Locrian pattern. It's going to be 5, 6, 8 on the low E. That starts at A note. 5, 6, 8. We're going to walk that same pattern straight across all 6 strings. 5, 6, 8, 5, 6, 8, and so forth. I'm going to run that real quick and you can see what that is. Okay, now that's the pattern. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to spruce that up a little bit. I like to do a thing where I call it a backwash. I'll run down 3 strings, go back a string, go down 3, back 1, down 3, and so forth. It looks like this. Okay, now to slow that down, I go down 3 strings, then I go back to the string I just played, start the pattern there. Go back 1, go back 1, and there's my pattern. I'll play a little faster for you. It's a great pattern to use. This one actually is in the key of A minor, if you will, because you're starting on an A and you're actually ending on the C. It's Locrian bass, so it doesn't really follow true minor as such, because obviously the notes aren't the same, but you can use that if you're playing in repetition in fast mode. Essentially, kind of do the bookends we talked about in lesson 1, where you think a little more chromatically. You can play just about any note you want, but you kind of start and stop on certain notes. This one applies. So if you're playing something in A minor, even though this isn't a true minor, it's a Locrian, but you start and you have the minor third there, you can use that in the pattern as well. It's kind of a nice twist up, if you will. So that's one of the patterns I use. I'm going to do a little jam and kind of show you how I put that in, and I'm going to run it in the key of E a little differently, and just show you how I use that fingering. You can also, if you want to invert that, you could use the 1, 3, 4, which is more your Aeolian mode or your minor scale pattern. You can change it up for that if you want, just different for flavor. So here's the pattern in E, and I'm going to run that Locrian style basis over top of that. And there you have it. Moving on. I have a lot of students come to me, and a lot of guitar players come to me and say, man, are scales that important to learn? Absolutely yes. If you want to play solos, you want to do the crazy shred stuff, you got to learn scales. And more importantly is you know, the chromatic scale we talked about in the first lesson is the mother. That's the parent scale you want to learn. But major scales are second to that. You want to learn majors because if you play any type of chord, that's what they're stemmed from. They actually build off of the major scale. So we're going to start today. I'm just going to introduce the scales to you. Let's start with the major, and then we're going to get into some modes off of that. And I know all you guitar players out there are thinking, man, I don't want to learn modes. You know, everybody talks about modes. What's a mode? I'll explain that here in a few minutes. So let's start with the A major. We're going to stick with A again today. So A starts on the top string, 5th fret. We have, this is A note. We go to the 7th fret, which is a B note. Okay, we drop down to the A string, 4th fret. That's your C sharp. We go to the 5th fret on the A string. That's a D note. Go to the 7th fret. That's an E note. Drop down to the 4th fret on the D string. That's an F sharp note. Then go to the 6th fret on the D string. That's your G sharp note. And then we go to the 7th fret. Gets back to A. So we play that in repetition. Okay, that's your A major scale. It also sounds like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That's exactly what that sings. Okay, now let's move on. A good way to memorize that is your fingering pattern. Okay, basically it's, if you're talking steps, you go whole step up from the root note to the 2nd is a whole step, or 2 frets. From the 2nd to the 3rd is a whole step. From the 3rd to the 4th is a half step. From the 4th to the 5th, that's a whole step. From the 5th to the 6th, that's a whole step. From the 6th to the 7 is a whole step, and then from the 7 back to the 8 is a half step. So that's your pattern, and that goes for every major scale if you want to write that down. This will also be on my, if you go to my Facebook page, it's the Joe Riley Ford, it's a dash guitarist. I'll have a folder on there. You can actually go on there and pull some of these tab lessons off there if you need to look those up. So anyway, if you play the A major scale, somebody said, hey, I want to play in B major, all you would do is take that same pattern and move that to a B note. So B would be 7th fret here. Exact same fingering, just started on that B note. If somebody said we're going to play in the key of G, you would slide down, here's a G note, play the same pattern. Okay, so it's that simple. Now, we want to move into modes. Now, like I said, everybody says, do I really need to learn scales? Yes. Do I need to learn modes? If you want to shred and you want to know exactly what you're doing here, yeah, it helps. What the modes are, those are the 7 derivatives of the major scale. What that means is if you take a major scale and you break it apart and play a pattern starting with each one of those individual notes, following diatonically. Now, diatonic means you're following suit as the parent scale, so you're not stepping outside of the notes of that scale. That's your modes, and I'll explain that here as I play that. So if I look at my major scale, that's also the Ionian mode. Also going to that, the terminology modes, you know, the Ionian and all that, that's actually just an ancient Greek terminology. They were ancient Greek cities, so if you studied music theory, that's your answer for that one, where the mode names come from. Okay, so the Ionian mode is one and the same as the major scale. So that's... Okay, now if I said, let's play the Dorian mode. The Dorian is the major second, so that's go to the 2nd note in the scale and play through all the same notes of the scale, staying true to that, but you start and stop on the 2nd in the scale. That's the Dorian mode of the major scale. If I said play the Phrygian mode, the Phrygian is the 3rd in the scale. So it starts the 3rd note, there's your 3rd, and it plays true to that. So here's the Phrygian mode. There's your Phrygian mode. Now if I said play the Lydian is the 4th. That starts at the 4th note in the scale and plays through again. Okay, now we go to the 5th note in the scale, which is the Mixolydian mode. Now, Mixolydian is kind of a useful term because a Mixolydian mode is the one and the same as the 7 scale. And I haven't gotten into the chords yet with you. We're going to talk about that probably the next few lessons. What a 7 scale is basically a major scale with a flat 7. So the Mixolydian mode is exactly that. It's one and the same. So if I said we're going to play something in the key of A7, it tells you that we have a flat 7 note. Okay, well, an A7 scale is the same thing as an A Mixolydian. Here we're playing E Mixolydian since it's the 5th in the A major scale, and an E Mixolydian is one and the same as E7 scale. So here we go. And that's it. Okay, moving on. The 6th note of the scale is the Aeolian mode. Aeolian is one and the same as your natural minor or your minor scale. It's also the relative to the root note. Relative meaning if you play a minor scale, for every minor scale there's a relative major. They all have the same notes. Obviously they're in a different order because you have minor sounds and major sounds. Here, the Aeolian mode of the A major scale is F sharp. In other words, F sharp minor is relative to A major. And it's another way to figure that out. If you're playing the major scale, just count up to the 6th note. The 6th note is your relative minor. So here is your F sharp minor. All those notes are the same notes that are in the A major scale. Okay, and then that leaves for the last one, which is the Locrian pattern. And Locrian, as we did in the first exercise here, utilizes a 1-2-4 type pattern. And here, the Locrian note is going to be your 7, which is actually a G sharp. So if we play the Locrian pattern, there's your Locrian mode. So this is introduce you to the modes a little bit today. I use these all the time. I am fluent on breaking apart the major scale and manipulating that in every way possible. I play a lot of things in minor. So obviously when I'm playing in minor, I base the song, the rhythm is possibly out of a minor key, but I just find my relative major note from that. Another way to do that, if I'm playing in a minor, just count the minor scale to the 3rd note. That's your relative major note, root note for that scale. So I'll find the relative major, and I'll break that major apart into modes, and I'll manipulate those and throw those into my solo patterns. It's another way to open up the fretboard for me and come up with some different variety of, I guess, sounds and styles, if you will. It makes you think differently. So there you go. So moving on. The next thing I have are just some taps. Now, I know everybody wants to know like what little tricks that I do in my solos. I like to do a lot of sweep picking, like arpeggios, things like that, and in that little jam I did at the beginning there, I did one where I do an arpeggio and I tap out a note. I'll play that for you real quick so you can see it. Okay, that's the pattern. What I do is I basically take, and I tap out a note with my right hand. I can manipulate the scale, the sweep in different ways and play major, minor, whatever just hits me at the time. It's the same thing. It's one of those things when you go to play and you're playing, fast shred, you can stick true to the scale, which you should, but sometimes it's just kind of fun just to ad-lib and roll with it and see what happens. Sometimes it sounds good, sometimes it doesn't. It's just trial and error. So what I do there, and I'll do a couple different ones here where I play, I'll tap out. All I'm doing is I'm going up a whole step from my last note. I play with my pinky on the bottom string. I'll do a tap and pull off with that. So, and then I'll walk back with my arpeggio. I like to throw those in kind of random places here and there when I'm doing solos. So that's one of the little tricks that I do. All right, and then I do have some questions from some viewers, and a lot of these questions that I get are just basically about me as a guitar player. And the one is influences. Who are my influences? I've got a ton. I mean, I can't really, there's not enough time on this video to name everyone. Just about any guitar player at some point that I've listened to has had some sort of influence on me one way or the other, good or bad. But to start the list, Randy Rhoads is obviously, dear to me. That's what kind of got me started on guitar. Fantastic player and died way too young. Second to that is Dimebag. Dimebag Darrell from Pantera and so forth. I'm a huge Dimebag follower. Same thing. Died way too young. I did have the pleasure of meeting Dime at one point in time. So another great guitar player. Alex Skolnick from Testament, and he's also played with Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Great guitar player. Huge influence on me as a kid. Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, George Lynch. These guys were just huge to me. You can tell that in a lot of my playing. A lot of the licks that I come up with They were derived from things these guys did. So hats off to them. And then the last two that I want to mention is Zach Wilde. As a kid, to see Zach join Ozzy's band at such a young age, and he's not much older than I am. It was a huge influence on me to see that, and I love this style, so I like to put that in a lot of my rhythm work. And then off the beaten path, David Gilmour from Pink Floyd is probably right up there with all those guys, because the feel that he has is incredible. So that's just some of my influences. So hopefully that answers any questions that any of you guys would have. And then the last thing, I know a lot of people know that I spent 3-4 years on the road with Mr. Crowley. It was an Ozzy tribute band. And I've had somebody ask me about the Crazy Train licks. So I really don't want to get into playing Crazy Train a whole lot. But I do want to talk about some of the Randy Rhoads tricks, because he is dear to me as a player. One of the things that I picked up on by studying Randy was he uses a thing with his pick where he does sort of a mute with the edge of his thumb when he plays his low bass notes. Some of the high notes he could manipulate that as well. But like when he played the intro to Crazy Train, he's utilizing the side of his thumb to almost knock off the edge of that note so that it doesn't sound so harsh when you play those notes. Now that song is based out of F sharp minor, but it also uses the relative of A major in the rhythm for the verses. So just to kind of walk you through that real quick, that intro lick. Okay, that little lick that he plays there, while he's playing that, he's actually using the side of his thumb to mute that out, if you will, kind of knock off the harshness of those notes. So one more time, this is using the thumb. So kind of gives it a nice, like, smooth playability to it. And then the other thing I want to throw in there with Randy was the taps. Obviously coming from LA, the whole thing back in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, into the mid 80s was the Eddie Van Halen style taps. Now obviously Eddie's a huge influence on me as well. So Randy took it a little differently. He actually liked to flip-flop some of those patterns, which I actually dig a lot more. If you're going to do an Eddie Van Halen type tap, if you're doing that style, it's more or less just a standard. Where Rhoads, he would actually do like it's a back tap. So basically, he would tap to the higher note, then do a pull off hammer on, and then tap again. So the Crazy Train lick actually is this. So it's a little differently than the Eddie Van Halen, and personally I think it has kind of a cool touch to it. It's definitely different than what the norm. And then you get into guys like Steve Vai, who once again I adore Vai's playing. He likes to do the double taps and things like that, and utilize as much as possible. I like to throw those in as well. Some things I like to do is I like to tap with different fingers. So I'm utilizing my number 1 and number 2 on my right hand to tap these notes. With that in mind, I'm actually tapping like I'm back washing again. I'm tap, go to the next string, tap, and back and forth. So, and then you can move that tap around. And so forth. So anyway, to wrap up today's lesson, there's a lot of things I covered. Hopefully you guys can pick up some of these little things and use them somewhere in your playing. Once again, feel free to send me some questions, whether it be on Facebook. You can see me on Facebook at Joe Riley Guitarist. Go ahead and hit me up on there. Send me a message. I do get that directly. Or you can go to my email, which is just joerileymusic@yahoo.com. Feel free to send me some stuff there. So in the meantime, keep shredding, and I'll see you next lesson.